Thank you, Donna, and thanks to FDA for participating in this. It's an opportunity we don't often get. So I'm Wayne Eskridge. I'm the founder, CEO, and a cirrhosis patient of the Fatty Liver Foundation. And as I thought about this presentation, I could tell you my story personally, but it's very like the ones you've heard. And I share bits and pieces of my journey with most of the people that have been on here. So I'd like to actually talk a bit about the relationship of the patient community and the FDA. I really didn't think much about FDA at all until I found out that I was a cirrhosis patient and started to think about clinical trials and all of the things that go along with that. And as I think about what the FDA is, we want you to be our champions. We want you to be our protectors. We understand the need for the service that you do, which is to really care about us and to keep us well, give us an opportunity to have effective medications. And that's really a vital relationship that's meaningful to us. And there's something about your role, which is the inertia that it needs to have. There's this real risk if you were to be stampeded into things, and we don't want that to happen. We want you to be thoughtful and to think about things and to use due care. But one of the things that happens in your world is that you're surrounded by this giant tornado of lawyers and people who want to catch you and charge you with things and beat up on you. And you've got your army of lawyers that's defending you, and you're behind your shield wall. So there's a gulf that builds up between regulators like you and people like us who you serve. And over the years, I think that's gotten wider. And this effort to close that gap, I think, is really important, and it's extremely valuable to us as patients. But as we think about that level of inertia, what the consequence of that is something to think about, I think. Because if we look behind us and we look at 10,000 deaths, and we say, oh, that is terrible. And we tisk, and that's a statistic. If we think about the future and 10,000 people who are dying now, that's not as convenient because we may come and complain. So, that's the balance that you walk, because what you do can have a tremendous impact on our death, really. And as we think about biopsy, I get offended by the reference to biopsy as the gold standard. Now, it's more like a tin standard. We started doing biopsies in the 1920s. We've been doing needle biopsies for 100 years. And that was the best we had. It really was. And we learned a lot. But it is very difficult as a gold standard, because you get two pathologists and they won't necessarily see them the same way. You won't necessarily get the same reading of the same slide from the same pathologist. So the big variation that we see in reading of biopsies is just such a hazard to this whole development process. And so we need to be more sensitive to saying this is such a gold standard, because it hazards the development, and it historically was the best we had, but it's quickly becoming not the best that we have. An important thing to think about, and I think that it's something that FDA should really think closely about, is that we're living in a time that is unlike anything we've ever seen. You know, information, medical information. In the 50s, it was doubling every 50 years. By 2010, they estimate it was doubling every 3.5 years. There's estimates that say by 2020, medical knowledge was doubling every 0.2 of a year. That's 73 days. You know, the simple fact is that any of you who got out of med school or out of your education in 2010, the information that was available at that time is about 10% of the medical knowledge that we have today. And yet we persist with the biopsy with its historical muscle as what we focus on. So I think that it would be really important for FDA to realize and to be proactive about the fact that the rate of change of knowledge is so fast that you need to be, you've got all these timetables, 6 months, and with FDA is not a long time. You have lengthy processes that you go through, and there's not a sense of urgency about a lot of things that matches what we see going on in the world. And this disease is advancing through our society at such a horrendous rate, that we really need to get a handle on it as quickly as we can. And I want you to use due care, and I don't want you to put me in a position to hurt me, but you have us yoked to biopsy, and the things that are coming forward today really deserve to have a lot more, lot faster integration into the process. You have your subpart H process, but you really have pretty much limited us to biopsy there. And, we see things like the corrected T1s and the 3D MREs, and we see the pathology. Well, even if we want to stick with biopsy, we at least should digitize all those slides, because at least the computer can duplicate what it says every time, and we don't have to have that huge variation. So we need to proactively work to adopt the advances that are happening in such a fast pace, because science and knowledge and the whole ability to understand is advancing so quickly. We're looking at the behavior of chemical reactions in living cells. I mean, you couldn't have even thought of that 25 years ago. So, we need to take advantage of that. And it's important, I think, for the FDA to remember that you went through a critical path initiative at one time, and you looked in the processes that were most important. And I think that it's time to recognize the value of this torrent of advancement that we're going through, and that if you can try to build a more responsive system and to not be satisfied with, well, yeah, a meeting in 6 months will be a good thing. I mean, a meeting, it doesn't take 6 months to put a lot of these things together. And I would really like to see, that kind of thoughtful advancement of the timetable of things that you go through. And it's not, I don't want you to needlessly rush, but I don't want you to just sit back behind your shield wall and do things like you always have, because we've been doing it that way for 50 years. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity to have this comment, and thank you for the time.